5 seconds, a marriage would shatter. In 5 minutes, a $1 billion empire would be exposed. And in 5 days, he would lose everything he thought he owned. August 14th, 2019. Manhattan, the 47th floor of a gleaming skyscraper where power deals are made and fortunes change hands before lunch. Michael Patterson just made the biggest mistake of his life, in front of 12 witnesses who didn't know they were watching a billionaire get assaulted by her own employee. But hear what nobody knew that day. The quiet, pregnant woman he humiliated, the one he dismissed with a slap across her face, she wasn't just his wife. She owned the ground he stood on. She signed his paychecks. She controlled every asset he thought he'd earned through his own merit. And what happened next? Nobody, not the lawyers, not the media, not even his mistress, saw it coming. This is a true story. The names have been changed. Some details have been altered to protect identities. But the facts, the betrayal, the $1 billion secret, and the fall from grace, all of it happened exactly as you're about to hear. What you're about to witness isn't just about money or revenge. It's about the masks we wear, the lies we tell ourselves, and the moment when everything we've built on deception comes crashing down in the most public, most devastating way possible. This is the story of a woman who hid in plain sight for 7 years, a man who confused his wife's generosity for his own greatness, and the single act of violence that exposed the truth to the entire world. The coffee cup fell in slow motion, at least that's how the witnesses would later describe it. Dark liquid arcing through the air in a luxury boardroom where the annual rent could feed a family for a decade. The cup shattered against Italian marble flooring. Coffee splattered across a white designer blouse. And in that instant, a chain of events began that would unravel carefully constructed lies, destroy careers, end a marriage, and reveal one of the most extraordinary deceptions in modern corporate history. Her name, for our purposes, is Catherine Hayes, but if you had searched that name online in 2012, you would have found nothing. No LinkedIn profile, no social media presence, no trace in the digital world where everyone leaves footprints. And that absence wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. Catherine grew up in Queens, the daughter of immigrants who came to America with $300 and a dream that their children would have opportunities they never did. Her father, Thomas Hayes, built a small logistics company from absolutely nothing, working 18-hour days, slowly building success through sheer determination. By the time Catherine was in high school, Hayes Logistics employed 40 people and generated $7 million annually. Thomas Hayes died when Catherine was 23 years old. Sudden heart attack. No warning. Everyone expected the business to collapse. Catherine was young, still in graduate school studying applied mathematics and computer science with no business experience. The employees prepared their resumes. The competitors circled like sharks, but Catherine surprised everyone. She didn't try to run her father's company. She sold it. The entire business for $2.3 million. People thought grief had clouded her judgment, but Catherine had seen something no one else had noticed. The logistics industry was about to be completely transformed by technology. Her father's company, built on personal relationships and handshake deals, would become obsolete within a decade. So Catherine took that $2.3 million and disappeared. Not literally, but professionally, publicly, she became a ghost. She created a web of shell companies, trusts registered in Delaware and the Cayman Islands, legal structures so complex that even forensic accountants would later struggle to untangle them. And then she started building. She hired software developers under contract, never meeting them in person. She licensed patents through intermediaries. She acquired struggling tech startups through lawyers who never revealed the buyer's identity. Slowly, methodically, invisibly, Catherine built what would become Rod Tech Industries. By the time she was 28 years old, that initial $2.3 million had grown to $420 million. By 32, she was approaching billionaire status, controlling a technology empire that most people in the industry had heard of but whose ownership remained mysteriously opaque. Corporate filings listed Rod Tech as owned by a trust. The beneficial owner was buried under 6 layers of legal entities. each one carefully constructed to maintain Catherine's anonymity. And why? Catherine would later explain it in a deposition, her voice calm, her words chosen carefully. She had watched what happened to visible wealth. She had seen wealthy women targeted, manipulated, valued only for their assets. She wanted to be loved for herself, not for what she could provide. She wanted relationships built on truth, not transactions. The problem was, you can't build truth on a foundation of lies. And Catherine was about to learn that lesson in the most painful way possible. Michael Patterson entered her life at a charity gala in 2013. He was 35, charming, educated, ambitious. Cornell MBA, strong resume in mid-level management at a respected tech firm, good salary but not wealthy. He wore confidence like an expensive suit, worked the room with practiced ease. Catherine noticed him because he didn't notice her. At an event where everyone was networking, calculating, positioning, Michael seemed genuinely engaged in conversation with an elderly woman who clearly had no business connections to offer. It was either authentic kindness or masterful manipulation. Catherine wanted to believe it was the former.
You look absolutely stunning tonight.
Thank you. You look very handsome yourself.
To us.
To us.
First conversation happened by the bar. Catherine was reaching for a glass of wine when Michael's hand accidentally bumped hers. He apologized with genuine embarrassment. They talked for 20 minutes about nothing important, books they'd read, places they wanted to travel. He never asked what she did for work, never tried to impress her with his credentials, just talked to her like a human being. When he asked for her number, Catherine hesitated. This was the moment when her carefully constructed walls would have to come down, at least partially. She gave him her personal number and told him she worked as an independent consultant, which was technically true. She consulted with herself on how to run her billion-dollar empire. They dated for 8 months before Michael proposed. 8 months of dinner dates and weekend trips and long conversations. Michael talked about his ambitions, his frustration with being overlooked at work despite his qualifications, his desire to build something meaningful. Catherine listened and encouraged and never once mentioned that she had already built something beyond his wildest professional dreams. She told herself she was protecting their relationship. That money would complicate things, but she was also testing him, though she wouldn't fully admit that to herself for years, testing whether he could be content. Testing whether his character was as solid as that first impression suggested. They married in April of 2014. Small ceremony, Catherine's choice. She wore an off-the-rack dress that cost $300. They honeymooned in Vermont instead of Europe. Michael thought it was because Catherine was frugal, practical, unpretentious. He had no idea his wife had paid cash for the entire bed and breakfast where they stayed, buying it through a shell company 3 months before their wedding. This was Catherine's pattern. Control everything while appearing to control nothing. Before we go any further, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The first 3 years of their marriage looked perfectly ordinary from the outside. Michael continued working his corporate job, bringing home a decent salary, complaining about office politics over dinner. Catherine continued her consulting work, which meant running a technology empire from a home office while pretending to be on conference calls with mid-level clients. They lived in a nice but not extravagant apartment in Manhattan. Michael's friends thought he'd married a sweet, smart woman who was maybe a bit reserved but clearly adored him. Catherine's mother, one of the few people who knew the truth, begged her daughter to tell her husband. But Catherine kept waiting for the right moment, and the right moment never seemed to come. But Michael was changing. Success, even moderate success, has a way of inflating ego. Promotions came regularly. His salary increased. Headhunters started calling. What Michael didn't know was that Catherine was watching his career carefully, and when she saw him being overlooked for positions he deserved, she intervened. Not directly, never directly, but a word to a board member here, a strategic introduction there, a quiet conversation with a recruiter. Catherine was paving Michael's path without him ever knowing the road had been cleared. And with each success, Michael attributed entirely to his own merit. His sense of entitlement grew stronger. By 2017, Michael had become someone Catherine almost didn't recognize. The man who had listened to an elderly woman's stories at a charity gala now interrupted people mid-sentence. The ambition that had seemed healthy was starting to look like hunger that could never be satisfied, and his frustration was increasingly directed at Catherine. Why wasn't she more ambitious? Why was she content with consulting work? He never said it directly, but Catherine could hear the subtext. He was embarrassed by her lack of visible professional achievement. In September of 2017, Catherine made a decision that would set everything in motion. Michael had been passed over for a vice president position at his company, and he was furious, ranting about incompetent leadership and how he was wasting his talent. Catherine listened to these rants for weeks, and then, quietly, she gave him exactly what he wanted. Through a series of intermediaries, Catherine arranged for Michael to be recruited for a position at Rod Tech Industries. Vice President of Operations, significant pay increase, real authority. The headhunter who called Michael made it seem like a competitive recruitment. Michael went through multiple interview rounds, never knowing that the questions had been designed to highlight his actual strengths, that the job had been his before the first handshake. When Michael got the offer, he was ecstatic. This was validation. He celebrated with expensive champagne, told Catherine that this was just the beginning, that he was finally on the path he deserved. Catherine smiled and congratulated him and felt a growing unease she couldn't quite name. She had given him this opportunity because she loved him, but she had also given it to him as another test. Would success make him kinder or crueler? She was about to find out. Michael started at Rod Tech in January of 2018. Within weeks, Catherine began seeing changes she didn't want to acknowledge. He came home later, energized by work in a way she hadn't seen in years. He started dressing more expensively, working out at an executive gym, getting haircuts at a place that charged $200. Catherine told herself this was good. He was thriving, but there were other changes too. He was less patient with her, more dismissive. When she tried to discuss his projects, offering insights that came from years of building the exact kind of systems he was now managing, he would smile condescendingly and explain things to her as if she were a child. The man who had fallen in love with her mind now seemed to find her intelligence threatening. And then there was Amber Chen. She joined Rod Tech's marketing department in January of 2018, same month Michael started. 29 years old, Stanford MBA, sharp and polished and hungry for advancement. Catherine first became aware of her in March when Michael mentioned her name 3 times in one dinner conversation. Amber had this great idea. Amber made an excellent point in the meeting. Catherine's internal alarms started going off. She had access to everything at Rod Tech, every email, every calendar, every security badge swipe. She told herself she wouldn't look, that she trusted her husband. She lasted 2 weeks before her curiosity overwhelmed her principles. The affair started in April of 2018. Catherine knew the exact date because she saw the hotel charge on Michael's corporate card, cross-referenced with Amber's calendar showing a late meeting that never appeared on any official schedule. She sat at her desk, staring at the evidence on her screen, feeling something crack inside her chest. She could have confronted him that day, could have revealed everything, ended it cleanly. Instead, Catherine did what she had always done. She gathered information. She documented, she watched, and she made plans. Over the next 16 months, Catherine became an expert on her husband's affair. She knew every hotel they used, every restaurant where they met, every lie Michael told to cover his absences. She read their text messages, saw Amber pushing him to leave Catherine, saw Michael making promises. And through it all, Catherine maintained her role, supportive wife. Woman who had no idea her marriage was disintegrating, but something else was happening too. Catherine was changing. The woman who had hidden her success to protect her relationships was starting to realize that hiding had protected nothing. Michael didn't love the real Catherine because he didn't know the real Catherine. She had hidden because she was afraid of being valued for her money instead of herself. And that fear had created exactly the isolation she was trying to avoid. In June of 2018, Catherine discovered she was pregnant. She sat in her bathroom staring at the positive test, feeling a complicated tangle of emotions. Joy because she had wanted a child. Terror because she was bringing a baby into a marriage built on mutual deception. Anger because Michael was still seeing Amber even as his wife carried his child. And something else. A clarity. A decision forming. Catherine told Michael about the pregnancy that evening. He was happy or performed happiness convincingly. He talked about being a father, about preparing the nursery. And that night after he fell asleep, Catherine sat in her home office and began planning. Not revenge exactly, but revelation, truth. An ending to the performance that had consumed 7 years of her life. The next 15 months were a masterclass in strategic patience. Catherine prepared meticulously. She documented the affair with thoroughness because that's exactly what she was doing. She restructured some of her corporate holdings, moving assets, clarifying ownership. She consulted with lawyers, specialists in divorce, domestic violence, corporate liability. She never told them she was planning anything specific, just asked hypothetical questions, gathered information. And she waited for the right moment. That moment came in the form of Rodtech's planned initial public offering. The company was preparing to go public, a massive undertaking that would value Rodtech at $2.3 billion and make Catherine's ownership a matter of public record for the first time. The SEC filings would reveal everything, but Catherine didn't want to wait for an SEC filing. She wanted the revelation to be memorable, public, and completely unambiguous. She wanted Michael to understand exactly what he had done, who he had betrayed, and what he was about to lose. And she wanted witnesses. The investor meeting was scheduled for August 14, 2019. 12 major institutional investors, 7 Rodtech executives including Michael, and 2 people whose presence Catherine personally arranged. Herself listed as external consultant, and Amber Chen there to present marketing strategy. Catherine wanted them both there. The wife and the mistress, both in the same room when everything came apart. She had thought through every detail, the room layout, the timing, the positioning. Catherine arrived at 8:45, 15 minutes before the meeting. She was 8 months pregnant, moving carefully, wearing a simple dress. She took a seat in the back of the conference room, quiet and unobtrusive. Michael stopped short when he saw her, confusion followed by irritation. He walked over. "What are you doing here? This is a closed meeting." Catherine smiled up at him. "I was invited. I'm presenting the corporate structure overview. You should get ready for your presentation." Amber arrived last, and Catherine watched the dynamic play out exactly as she had anticipated. Amber saw Michael, smiled with an intimacy that would be obvious to anyone paying attention, then noticed Catherine and faltered. She recovered quickly, professional mask sliding into place, but the moment had been illuminating. The meeting began. Presentations flowed smoothly. Market analysis. Revenue projections. Michael delivered his operational overview competently. The investors seemed impressed. Everything was proceeding normally, until the coffee break. Catherine had requested the break be included, unusual for a 2-hour meeting, but accepted without question. She had also personally reviewed the catering setup, making sure the coffee station was positioned in a specific location. At 10:15, the break was called. Catherine rose carefully, one hand supporting her pregnant belly, and moved toward the coffee station. She reached for a cup, misjudged the distance because her center of gravity was different, and bumped the table with her belly, just slightly. A cup tipped. Coffee splashed across the table, droplets arcing through the air, and then across Amber's white blouse. Amber's reaction was immediate and explosive. She gasped loudly, jumped back, stared at the spreading brown stain. "Are you kidding me? Do you have any idea how much this costs?" The room went silent, 12 investors frozen, 7 executives suddenly very interested in their phones. Catherine started to apologize, reaching for napkins. "I'm so sorry, I didn't see the cup, I can pay for dry cleaning." But Amber wasn't interested in apologies. "You didn't see? How could you not see? This is Chanel." Catherine kept her voice level. "I understand, I'll take care of it, I'm really very sorry." But Amber stepped closer, her voice rising. "Dry cleaning, it's ruined. Just like you ruin everything by showing up where you don't belong. This wasn't about coffee or a blouse. This was about territory, about a mistress telling a wife to know her place. The investors shifted uncomfortably, and that's when Michael made his choice. Catherine watched him cross the room, not toward Amber to calm her down, toward Catherine. Toward his pregnant wife, who had just been publicly humiliated by his mistress. Michael's voice was low but audible harsh. "Alina, what are you even doing here? This is embarrassing." Catherine looked at her husband and saw a stranger. "Just go home. Please, just leave." Amber, emboldened, stepped forward. "Yes, why don't you go home? Some of us actually work here. Some of us are actually important to this company." Catherine felt something she hadn't felt in 7 years, clarity without emotion. She looked at her husband, waiting, giving him one last chance. Michael looked between Catherine and Amber, between his pregnant wife and his mistress, and he made his choice. "You heard her. Go." When Catherine didn't move, when she just stood there, Michael reached for her arm, not gently, with irritation. Catherine pulled back reflexively, protective of her belly, and Michael's control slipped. His hand connected with her face, not a slap exactly, something between a push and a strike. Catherine stumbled backward. Her hand went instinctively to her belly. Her other hand touched her cheek, feeling the sting. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. 12 investors stared. 7 executives tried to look anywhere else. Amber's face went pale, and Michael looked at his own hand like it belonged to someone else. Catherine straightened slowly. She touched her cheek where Michael's hand had connected, and when she spoke, her voice was quiet but absolutely clear. "You just made a very expensive mistake." Then Catherine turned and walked out, not quickly, not dramatically, just calmly, with dignity, moving at the careful pace pregnancy requires. Behind her, she heard Michael try to laugh it off. "Sorry about that, everyone. Marital drama, you know how it is. Let's get back to the presentation." But one of the investors stood up. Her voice was ice. "I think we're done here." One by one, the other investors followed, gathering their materials, getting out of a room that had just become legally toxic. By 10:30, the conference room was empty. The $2.3 billion IPO was effectively dead, and Michael still didn't understand what he had done. Catherine took a car service home, a car that had been waiting, arranged in advance, part of the plan. She sat in the back seat and made a series of phone calls, first to her attorney, then to her head of security, then to her mother, tears finally coming, and finally to the chair of Rodtech's board of directors, a formal notification that an incident had occurred requiring immediate executive review. By the time Catherine reached her apartment, wheels were already in motion. Within an hour, someone leaked to Rodtech's board of directors an email from one of the investor attendees expressing concerns about what they had witnessed. The board went into emergency session. Michael was called in at 3 p.m. expecting to discuss salvaging the investor relationships. Instead, he walked into a room with Rodtech's general counsel and human resources. They asked him to explain what happened. Michael tried spinning it, minimizing it. The general counsel stopped him. "Michael, we have 12 witness statements being prepared right now. All of them describe you striking your pregnant wife in a professional setting. This isn't ambiguous. This is assault." Michael's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, defensiveness, then fear. He was suspended immediately, pending investigation. He was escorted from the building by security, his access badges deactivated. He left carrying a box with his personal items, still not fully grasping the magnitude, still thinking this was fixable. He tried calling Amber 17 times that afternoon. She didn't answer. Finally, she sent a text. "I can't be involved in this. I have my career to think about. Please don't contact me again." The woman he had risked his marriage for had disappeared the moment he became inconvenient. 48 hours after the incident, 3 legal letters arrived at Michael's apartment. Divorce filing from Catherine's attorney, restraining order, and termination from Rodtech for cause, no severance, no stock options. Michael read that letter 3 times. They couldn't just fire him for a personal matter, could they? He would sue. He would fight this. He was already mentally composing his wrongful termination case when a 4th communication arrived, a news alert on his phone. The headline made no sense at first. RodTech founder emerges from anonymity following workplace violence incident. He clicked through with hands that had started shaking. Billionaire tech entrepreneur Catherine Hayes, previously anonymous majority shareholder and founder of RodTech Industries, has stepped forward publicly for the first time following an incident at company headquarters. Hayes owns approximately 68% of the company through a complex trust structure. The revelation comes after Hayes was allegedly assaulted by her husband, RodTech Vice President Michael Patterson, during an investor presentation. Patterson has been terminated. The company's planned IPO has been postponed indefinitely. Michael stopped reading, went back, read it again. Founder, majority shareholder, billionaire, Catherine, his consultant wife who worked from home. Catherine owned RodTech. Catherine was the mysterious beneficial owner. Catherine had founded the entire empire. And Michael had been working for her the entire time. He sat down heavily, phone still in his hand, brain trying to process information that didn't fit reality. Catherine wasn't a consultant making $90,000 a year. She was a billionaire. Their apartment, she owned it. The car he drove, she was paying for it. His job, the prestigious position he thought he had earned through talent, she had given it to him. Every success he had celebrated, all of it was built on Catherine's foundation. He wasn't a self-made executive. His wife had been paying his salary while he cheated on her. The magnitude of his stupidity crashed over Michael in waves, and behind the shock was something else. Anger, resentment. Catherine had lied to him, manipulated him. Surely that mattered. Surely he was a victim here too. By Friday morning, the story was everywhere. Every major news outlet, every social media platform. The story had everything people love: secret wealth, corporate intrigue, a pregnant victim, a public assault. A mistress. The internet was ravenous. Catherine's attorney didn't just release a statement, they released documentation. Michael's hearing records, his salary history, the apartment lease owned by Catherine's shell company, even his car payment. The attorney presented it all, publicly demonstrating that Michael had been living a life entirely financed by the woman he had betrayed and assaulted. Social media reactions were immediate and merciless. Wait, he was working for her company this whole time. She hid $1 billion from him for 7 years, kind of iconic. Imagine punching your boss who's also your pregnant wife. But there were darker reactions too. Questions about whether Catherine had set Michael up, whether hiding wealth from a spouse was itself a form of abuse. Michael went into hiding, deleted his social media, and then the financial reality started setting in. The Manhattan apartment he couldn't afford, the car about to be repossessed, credit card bills from a lifestyle calibrated to an income he no longer had. Everything had been covered by RodTech's executive benefits package, all of it gone. Michael made desperate calls looking for job opportunities for loans, but no one was hearing the man who had assaulted a pregnant billionaire. His name was Googleable in the worst possible way. The career he had worked years to build was over. He met with a lawyer, the best he could afford now, which wasn't very good. The lawyer was blunt. Michael, you have 12 witnesses. You have security footage. You struck a pregnant woman in a professional setting. There's no defense. Assault on a pregnant woman is a felony in New York. Your only option is to negotiate the divorce quietly and hope Catherine doesn't push for criminal prosecution. Michael protested. It was barely a push. He was stressed. Catherine had lied to him for years. Didn't that count for something? The lawyer looked at him with something between pity and contempt. What Catherine did was legal. What you did was not. And that's when the second revelation landed. During discovery for the divorce, Catherine's legal team disclosed the timeline of her knowledge about Michael's affair, and the disclosure revealed something that made Michael's lawyer pause. Catherine had known about the affair for 16 months, not suspected. Known. She had documented every hotel visit, every lie, every text message. Her attorneys presented a 200-page dossier with timestamps, locations, photographs from private investigators. Catherine had watched her husband's affair unfold for over a year and said nothing. Michael's lawyer looked up. This changes things. She knew and did nothing. Then she arranged for you to be in a high-pressure situation with both her and your mistress present. Michael felt something shift. Had Catherine set him up? The media loved this twist. Think pieces appeared. Is it abuse to hide wealth from a spouse? Did Catherine engineer Michael's downfall or simply give him rope to hang himself? The public split into camps. Michael latched onto the victim story because it was the only story where he wasn't entirely the villain. He started giving interviews, presenting himself as a man who had been deceived, manipulated, pushed to his breaking point. Yes, he had made a terrible mistake. Yes, he had betrayed his marriage, but he had been set up by a woman who had spent 7 years lying to him. It was a narrative that some people bought, not many, but enough. While Michael constructed his victim story, Catherine was dealing with her own crisis. She went into labor 3 weeks after the incident. She arrived at the hospital alone except for her security detail. The labor was long and difficult, and somewhere in the exhaustion and pain, Catherine broke in a way she hadn't allowed herself to break before. The nurses heard her crying between contractions, not from physical pain, from something deeper. When they asked if there was anyone they should call, Catherine realized with devastating clarity that there was. She had spent 7 years hiding from everyone. She had built an empire but isolated herself completely. And now she was about to become a mother with no support system, no community, no one she trusted because she had never allowed anyone close enough. Through tears, Catherine asked for her phone. The nurse assumed she was calling her lawyer. Instead, Catherine called her mother. The mother she had been avoiding for 3 years because she was ashamed. "Mama, it's me. I had the baby. I have a daughter, and I'm so sorry. I thought if I could build something big enough, I would finally feel safe. But I've never felt more alone." Her mother was crying too. "Where are you? I'm coming." Catherine's mother arrived within 2 hours, followed by Catherine's sister, her aunt, cousins, extended family that Catherine had cut off to maintain her privacy. They flooded into the hospital room, bringing the messy, complicated, unconditional support of family. For the first time since her father's death, Catherine let people in, really in, and they loved her anyway. The nurses later reported that Catherine, holding her newborn daughter, had whispered something. "I'm sorry I brought you into this mess. I thought I was protecting us by hiding, but I think I've been hiding from everyone my whole life." It was a moment of clarity that would reshape everything. Catherine realized that her deception hadn't protected her, it had imprisoned her. She had hidden her wealth to avoid being valued for money, but in hiding her wealth she had also hidden herself, her intelligence, her accomplishments, her strength. She had made herself small to feel safe, and all she had created was a smaller prison. The man she had married had never known her. How could he love someone he didn't know? And yes, he had betrayed her terribly. But she had betrayed herself first by refusing to be fully visible, fully known. The divorce trial became a spectacle, courthouse steps packed with media. Michael's attorney argued that Catherine's deception constituted fraud, that hiding assets was abuse, that Michael deserved compensation for emotional distress. Catherine's attorney presented the tax returns Michael had never bothered to read, showing Catherine's actual income reported accurately. They presented the prenuptial agreement Michael had signed without reading. They presented evidence that Catherine had never prevented Michael from knowing. She had simply never volunteered information, and he had never asked. The court wasn't sympathetic, but the proceedings revealed something else. Michael hadn't visited the hospital after his daughter was born, hadn't asked about her, hadn't even asked her name. When the judge questioned this, Michael's response was damaging. "My attorney advised me that contact could complicate the divorce proceedings." The judge's expression hardened. "Your attorney advised you not to meet your own child." The judge ruled quickly. No alimony, no asset division. Limited supervised visitation contingent on Michael completing anger management and parenting classes. Michael slumped in his chair. He had lost everything, but what happened next surprised everyone. Catherine stood up, asked to make a statement. "I didn't come here for revenge, Your Honor. I came here for truth." The courtroom went silent. "I lied to Michael about my wealth, that's true, but I never lied about my values. I told him I valued honesty, loyalty, partnership. He chose to betray all of that, not for love, for ego, but I failed too. I thought I could control everything by controlling information. Instead, I controlled nothing. I isolated myself. I manipulated situations. I tested him instead of trusting him." Catherine looked at Michael directly. Michael, you asked why I didn't tell you about my wealth. Here's the truth. I was testing you. Testing whether you could be a good partner regardless of what I had. You failed. Every day for 7 years, you had opportunities to be honest, faithful, kind. You chose differently, but I failed too. I enabled your worst instincts. I gave you a job you weren't qualified for because I wanted you to feel successful. I documented your affair for months instead of confronting you because I wanted ammunition. We destroyed each other. The difference is I have resources to rebuild. You don't. That doesn't make me better, it just makes me richer. I'm withdrawing my request for supervised visitation requirements. If Michael wants to be in his daughter's life, I won't use the law to stop him. But I won't enable him either. He'll have to show up on his own. The ball is in his court. Michael stared at Catherine, saw the woman he had married and never really known. And he said the only thing he could say, "I'm sorry." Catherine nodded, "I know." And that was it. No dramatic reconciliation. Just two people who had failed each other, acknowledging the wreckage. 3 years later, the outcomes would surprise everyone. Michael completed the anger management program, took the parenting classes, started seeing his daughter monthly, then weekly. He never got his executive career back. He works now as a project manager in New Jersey, makes about $60,000 a year, lives in a small apartment, but according to reports, he shows up for his daughter every single time. It's not redemption, but it's something, a small, genuine effort to be better. Catherine, meanwhile, rebuilt everything, made herself public, took over as CEO of Rodtech openly. The company's value tripled. Forbes estimates her net worth at $3.2 billion, but more importantly, she's visible, speaks at conferences, shares her story, including the parts where she was wrong, advocates for domestic violence survivors while acknowledging her own role. She started a foundation, the Catherine Hayes Foundation for Financial Literacy and Domestic Violence Prevention. Annual budget of $100 million, and the person she hired to run it, Michael's mother. Helen Patterson, former social worker who had spent 30 years working with abuse survivors. Catherine tracked her down and offered her the job. They work together now, not friends, but partners in something larger. Catherine reconciled with her extended family. Her daughter knows her grandmother, her aunts, her cousins, grows up surrounded by family in a way Catherine never allowed herself. The parts of Catherine's life she hid for years are now the parts she values most. She still runs her empire. But she's learned the difference between privacy and hiding. She's visible now, fully visible, and discovering that being seen completely is far less terrifying than spending a lifetime hiding. Michael and Catherine aren't friends. They will never be partners again, but they co-parent, civilly, sometimes even kindly. They attend their daughter's preschool events, sitting separately but acknowledging each other. They coordinate schedules without drama. And their daughter, she's 5 years old now. Brilliant and stubborn. She knows her mom is very busy with important work and her dad made big mistakes but is trying to be better. Age-appropriate truth. One day she'll know the whole story. And Catherine hopes she'll learn what Catherine learned. That hiding doesn't protect you, that money doesn't define you, that you can't control other people, only yourself. That visibility is terrifying but necessary, that the only way to be truly known is to risk being truly seen. So was Catherine a victim, a manipulator, a genius, a cautionary tale? Maybe all of those things. Maybe that's what makes her human. This story isn't really about a secret billionaire or revenge or even justice. It's about the masks we wear and the price we pay for wearing them, about the lies we tell ourselves about why we hide, about the courage it takes to be vulnerable in a world that punishes vulnerability. Catherine spent 7 years hiding $1 billion. She spent 5 seconds being publicly humiliated. And she spent 3 years learning that the hardest thing to reveal isn't your wealth, it's yourself. The real you, imperfect and scared and trying. That's the person worth knowing. That's the person worth loving, and that's the person Catherine finally allowed herself to